Danielle Roswell was 34 years old when she found the second phone zipped inside her husband's gym bag, 3 days before his brother's wedding. She almost didn't look. Terrence had never given her a reason to. For 2 years, she'd quietly funded his failing construction company out of her own savings, never once asking for credit. What she found on that phone was 8 months of text messages to a woman named Patricia, hotel confirmations, bank transfers, and one message that stopped her cold. Terrence calling her ugly, mocking the dress she'd bought for the wedding, telling Patricia she was bringing her instead as his real date. He had no idea Danny had already seen her own signature, forged on a document she'd never signed. He believed she was still the woman he'd described in that message. Small, overlooked, easy to replace. Danny closed the phone, placed it back exactly where she found it, and went downstairs to finish making dinner. The wedding was in 3 days, and she intended to be there. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The kitchen was quiet at 5:45 in the morning. That was how Danny liked it. She sat at the round table near the window, laptop open, the glow of the screen soft against her brown skin. A mug of black coffee steamed beside her right hand. Outside, the sky was still that deep, dark blue. Not quite night, not yet morning. The neighborhood hadn't woken up. No cars, no voices, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of her own steady breathing. Her eyes moved across the screen. She was reviewing a projection model she'd built for a private client, a small medical group in Phoenix that wanted to restructure their cash flow before the fourth quarter. The numbers were tight but workable. She'd already spotted 2 inefficiencies their previous accountant had missed entirely. She made a note in the margin column, reformatted the variance table, and leaned back in her chair. This was her real work, not the senior analyst title she carried at Mercer Financial, which paid well and looked impressive on paper. Not the carefully worded LinkedIn profile that described her as a strategic financial consultant. This, the quiet, early morning work she did before the rest of the world expected anything from her. This was what she had spent 3 years building from nothing. Her consulting business had no sign on a door, no lobby, no website with her photo on it. It was a name registered through a Shelf LLC, run through a separate email address, invoiced through a private billing platform. Terrence didn't know it existed. Not really. He knew she did some freelance stuff sometimes. He called it her hobby, with the particular tone of a man who thought he was being generous by not saying something worse. He didn't know it earned more than his company did. He especially didn't know that she knew that. She minimized the projection file and opened her personal banking dashboard. A transfer confirmation sat at the top of the ledger, time-stamped 11:58 p.m. the night before. Outgoing transfer, $4,000, Roswell Construction LLC operating account. She stared at it for a moment. That was the 4th transfer in 6 months. $16,000 total, moved quietly out of her personal savings and into the business her husband ran, or tried to run. She had structured each one as a private loan, documented with promissory notes she kept in a password-protected folder Terrence had never seen. He thought the deposits came from a business line of credit he'd applied for in the spring. The application had been denied. Danny had stepped in without telling him, because telling him would have required a conversation neither of them was ready to have. She closed the tab. Terrence came downstairs at 7:30. He was already dressed, dark jeans, a fitted gray pullover, shoes on before he even reached the kitchen, moving like a man with somewhere to be. He crossed to the counter without looking at her, pulled a bottle of water from the refrigerator, and turned around. His eyes landed on her face, then moved away. "You look tired," he said. Danny picked up her coffee mug. "Good morning to you, too." "I'm just saying." He leaned against the counter, scrolling his phone with his thumb. "Reginald's thing is in 3 days. You might want to get some sleep before then." "I've been awake for 2 hours." She kept her voice even. "I'm fine." He made a small sound, not quite agreement, not quite dismissal, something in between. Then, "You doing that freelance thing again?" She glanced at the laptop. "Working on projections." "Right." He said the word the way people say sure, like it meant the opposite. "Hobby stuff." She didn't answer. She turned back to the screen and moved her cursor to the next column. He took his water and his phone and walked out of the kitchen. She heard him take a call in the hallway, voice dropping low within seconds. She didn't try to hear it. She just noticed it, filed it away in the quiet part of her mind that had been collecting these moments for months. The call lasted 11 minutes. She counted without meaning to. He came back through the kitchen once, briefly, to grab his keys from the hook by the door. He mentioned he'd had to cancel the dinner he'd suggested for that evening, something about a client meeting running late, or maybe it was a materials issue. She couldn't remember his exact words, because they were delivered over his shoulder on his way out, door already swinging shut behind him. That evening, Danny went to the bedroom closet to pull out Terrence's suit for the wedding. The closet was organized the way it had always been, her side on the left, his on the right. She found the garment bag hanging where she'd put it 2 weeks ago, pressed and ready. She reached past it for his travel bag and stopped. His gym bag was on the floor, not in the usual spot beside the shoe rack, pushed toward the back corner, zip shut. She reached down and picked it up. It was heavier than it should have been. She unzipped it. Beneath a folded towel and a pair of sneakers, something hard and flat shifted with the movement. She pushed the towel aside. A second phone. Small, black. The screen lit up the moment her hand touched it, casting pale light up through the dark of the closet. A text notification blinked at the top of the screen. The contact name read, Patricia. Danny sat down on the closet floor. She didn't plan to. Her legs just bent beneath her, slow and quiet, like her body needed to be closer to the ground for what was coming next. The phone was small and warm in her hand. A prepaid model, nothing fancy. The kind you could buy at a drugstore with cash and nobody would ask your name. She knew his passcode. She hadn't learned it on purpose. She'd seen him type it 100 times. Thumb moving out of habit, not caution. Top right, bottom left, top left, bottom right. The same 4 corners. She typed it now, and the phone opened. The message thread with Patricia was at the top. 8 months long. Danny scrolled slowly. The early messages were careful, professional even. Great meeting today. I think the rebrand direction is solid. Then closer. Then warmer. Then nothing close to professional at all. By March, there were hotel confirmations, a Marriott downtown, a boutique place near the airport she recognized from a work trip she'd taken last year. Terrence had told her he was in Columbus that weekend, visiting an old client. She kept scrolling. In April, a bank alert had been forwarded from Terrence to Patricia in a screenshot. The account number wasn't one Danny recognized, not the main business account she transferred her loans into. A different one. A secondary account she hadn't known existed, with a balance that had grown in steady increments over the past 6 months. Her stomach tightened. She recognized the deposit amounts. 4,000, 4,000, 3,000, 5,000. Her money, her transfers, moved somewhere she had never been meant to see. In May, there were invoices. Patricia had sent them as attachments. Clean, professional PDFs with her marketing firm's letterhead. Roswell Construction, LLC, Rebrand Consulting Services, Phase 1 through 4. Each invoice matched almost exactly to a deposit that had come from Danny's personal account. Patricia hadn't just received the money. She had helped build the paperwork to make it disappear. The most recent messages were from 4 days ago. Danny's eyes moved across the screen, and she read each one without looking away. She's been wearing that dress around the house like it's a whole personality, Terrence had written. Trying too hard. Honestly, she looks ugly in it, like she's playing dress-up. Patricia had replied with a laughing emoji. Then, she actually bought a new dress for your brother's wedding? That's sweet. Poor thing, she thinks she's the prize, Terrence wrote back. Getting a little too comfortable with that idea. I've been patient, but I'm done pretending. So what are you saying? I'm saying you're coming to the wedding with me, my actual date. I'll figure out the rest after. Terrence, I mean it. I'm tired of performing. You've earned your spot at that table more than she ever did." Patricia's response came 3 minutes later. "Well, whose money do you think paid for the table? LOL. Terrence had sent back a single laughing emoji. That was all. Danny sat with the phone in her hands and did not move for a long moment. The closet was dark except for the glow of the screen. She could hear the television downstairs, the low murmur of a sports channel Terrence kept on in the background the way some people kept lights on. She could smell something. Pasta, maybe, or rice. He'd been cooking when she came upstairs. She looked at the messages again. She looks ugly in it. She thought about the dress. Emerald green. She'd bought it 6 weeks ago on a lunch break, tried it on in the dressing room under fluorescent lights, and felt, for just a moment, genuinely good. She had hung it in the closet and looked at it sometimes in the morning, a small private thing. She looked at Patricia's reply. "Whose money do you think paid for the table?" The tightness in her stomach did not turn into crying. It turned into something else, something slower and more deliberate, something that settled behind her ribs like a stone finding the bottom of still water. She scrolled back to the invoice attachments and took her time reading each one. Phase 1, Phase 2, the dates, the amounts, the firm name, Okafor Creative Solutions, LLC. She memorized what she needed to memorize. Then she locked the phone. She placed it back in the gym bag exactly as she'd found it, beneath the folded towel, beside the sneakers, flat against the bottom. She zipped the bag. She put it back in the corner. She stood up, smoothed her clothes, and walked out of the closet. She went down the stairs, one hand light on the railing. Terrence was at the stove, back to her, stirring something in a pot. "Dinner smells good," she said. He turned his head halfway. "Almost ready." "Okay." She pulled out a chair and sat at the kitchen table. "Take your time." She folded her hands in front of her and waited. The morning was gray and cool. Danny loaded her suitcase into the trunk before Terrence came downstairs. She worked quietly, moving with the easy calm of someone who had already made up her mind about everything. One bag, packed the night before while he slept, every item chosen on purpose. The emerald dress hung in a garment bag on the hook above the back seat. She hadn't bought it to please him. She understood that now. She'd bought it because she had stood in that dressing room and felt something real. She was bringing it anyway. Not for him. Not anymore. Terrence appeared in the doorway in his undershirt, coffee in hand. "You're leaving now?" "Reginald's fiancée needs help with the table settings," Danny said, pulling her keys from her coat pocket. "I told her I'd be there by noon." He looked at her for a moment, not with suspicion, with the vague, distracted gaze of someone whose attention is already elsewhere. "I'll be there tomorrow afternoon." "I know." She smiled at him, easy and light, the kind that gave away nothing. "Drive safe." She got in the car and left. The lakeside venue sat about 2 hours north of the city, tucked between a tree line and a long stretch of still water that caught the sky like a mirror. It was the kind of place that looked better in real life than in photos. Wide stone steps, white wood trim, a long covered porch with rocking chairs facing the water. Danny stood on that porch for a moment after she parked. Just stood there, breathing the clean, cold air. The lake was flat and quiet. A few birds crossed the far tree line. She picked up her bag and went inside. Reginald's fiancée, Simone, was already in the main hall arranging centerpieces, her hair pinned up and a smear of gold ribbon on her forearm. She lit up when she saw Danny. "You actually came early." "I said I would." Danny set down her bag and pulled off her coat. "Tell me what needs doing." They worked for 3 hours. Danny straightened chair arrangements, helped confirm the caterer's setup, and fixed a seating chart that had 3 names spelled wrong. She was good at it, at making things orderly and precise without drawing attention to herself. Simone kept thanking her. Danny kept saying it was nothing. It was not nothing. It was the kind of focus that kept a person from feeling every hour that passed. By late afternoon, she had showered, dressed, and settled into her seat before the first family car pulled up the gravel drive. The rehearsal dinner began at 7. The main room glowed warm, candles on linen tablecloths, the smell of cedar and something roasting in the kitchen. Relatives filled in slowly, aunts and cousins and old family friends, finding their seats with low conversations and the kind of laughter that only comes in rooms full of people who grew up together. Danny was already at her table when they arrived. Green dress, hair up, soft at the edges. She'd applied her makeup the way she did before a meeting where the stakes were high. Careful, clean, nothing excessive. She sat with a glass of water and listened to the room fill. She watched the door. At 7:20, Terrence walked in. Patricia was on his arm. He hadn't even paused at the entrance to think about it. He walked in like a man who had already won an argument. Patricia wore burgundy, heels, a gold bracelet on her wrist. Confident and practiced, her hand resting in the crook of his elbow as he steered her toward a cluster of relatives near the far side of the room. "This is Patricia," he said, smiling the broad salesman's smile he wore at every social event. "My +1 for the weekend." A few relatives smiled back. A few looked confused. One uncle leaned toward his wife and said something in a low voice. Then the room found Danny. Not all at once. One person first, then another, like a ripple moving outward from where she sat. A woman at the next table touched her companion's arm. Someone near the bar went quiet mid-sentence. Danny did not stand. She did not turn her head dramatically or lift her chin. She simply sat, composed, and let the room do what it did. Camille was the one who went still first. She stood near the entrance in a cream blazer, mid-conversation with a cousin, and stopped talking completely when her eyes landed on Danny. Her face didn't crumple. It froze, the expression of a woman recalculating something quickly and finding the numbers wrong. Reginald appeared from a side hallway. His eyes went to Danny and then immediately away, sliding toward the floor like a man who couldn't hold the weight of his own gaze. Patricia's smile was the last to go. It faded slowly, like a light dimming rather than switching off, when she realized that Danny wasn't in the corner crying, wasn't absent, wasn't diminished in any of the ways Terrence had apparently promised she would be. Danny picked up her water glass and took a small, unhurried sip. 10 minutes later, she slipped out the side door and into the cool night air of the parking lot. She found a quiet spot between two parked cars, out of sight of the entrance, and scrolled to a name in her contacts. Andre picked up on the second ring. "Danny, what's going on?" "I need you to pull every financial record tied to Terrence's company," she said. "Tonight. Start with the invoices from a marketing firm, Patricia Okafor's." The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The lake was pale silver, the tree line black against a low gray sky. The parking lot was empty except for a few early arrival vehicles and one dark blue sedan parked near the far end, away from the lights. Danny crossed the gravel in a light jacket, her breath a small cloud in the cold air. She walked without hurrying. No one was watching this early. The venue was quiet, still. Inside, the kitchen staff would be starting the wedding brunch setup. Out here, it was just the birds and the cold. Andre's car was already running. She could see the glow of a laptop screen through the windshield. She opened the passenger door and got in. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was gone, his collar was open one button, and there was a half-empty coffee cup wedged in the cup holder. The laptop sat open across the center console, angled so they could both see it. A yellow legal pad covered in his tight, neat handwriting sat on the back seat. "Morning," he said. "What did he find?" He didn't waste time. That was the thing about Andre. He never softened information to make it easier to hear. He knew that wasn't what she needed. "A lot," he said. He turned the laptop toward her. The screen showed a spreadsheet, clean columns, color-coded, dates running down the left side. Andre pointed to a row highlighted in red. 8 weeks ago, a refinancing document was filed against your home. Joint property. It pulled $72,000 in equity. He paused. Your signature is on the filing. Danny looked at the document image on the right side of the screen. Her name, her signature, or something close to it. I didn't sign that, she said. I know. His voice was flat, professional. I compared it against 3 signature samples from other joint documents. The spacing is wrong. The pressure curve on the second letter is wrong. It's not your signature, Danny. Someone copied it. He let that land for 1 full second before continuing. That's bank fraud. Federal level. She stared at her name on that document. Someone had sat down and practiced her signature, had gotten close enough to file it, had looked at the thing she had built, her credit, her name, her house, and used it like a blank check. She said nothing. Andre scrolled down. Now, here's where it connects. The next page showed Patricia's business banking records, flagged and annotated in his handwriting. The $72,000 from the refinancing got routed through Terrence's construction company account. In the same 60-day window, that account also received your loan repayments, the 4 transfers you made. He pointed at each one. All of it, combined, moved through here. He tapped the screen. Patricia Okafor's marketing firm, listed as payment for services. He clicked open a second window. 6 invoices, all on Patricia's firm's letterhead. Clean fonts, professional layout, line items reading things like Brand Identity Phase 2 and Quarterly Content Strategy, full implementation. None of these services were performed, Andre said. I cross-referenced against her firm's public client work and the construction company's actual marketing output. There's nothing. No deliverables, no digital footprint, no campaign results. These invoices exist to make the transfers look legitimate. He looked at her. She wrote them knowing that. Danny studied the invoices. Patricia had done this carefully. She hadn't just accepted money from a man who was cheating. She had sat at a computer and typed the line items, had chosen the wording, had made sure the numbers lined up. Her firm is licensed through the state board, Danny said. Yes. Andre pulled up a tab he already had open. A fraud finding, or even a formal complaint with documentation this clean, would trigger an automatic review of her licensing status. Any firm she has active contracts with would be notified. He paused. It wouldn't be quiet. Danny didn't say anything for a moment. The lake outside the windshield had begun to lighten. A pale line of orange was forming at the horizon behind the trees. She thought about Patricia at the rehearsal dinner. The burgundy dress, the gold bracelet, the hand resting easily in the crook of Terrence's elbow, like it belonged there. She thought about those invoices, about how much thought it took to write them, about the fact that Patricia had done it anyway. Can you tie the forged signature directly to the funds that hit her account? Danny asked. Already working on it. Andre tapped the legal pad. I need one more document from the bank's filing office, and I can draw the full line. Forged signature to refinancing funds to construction account to her invoices to her direct deposit. He looked at her evenly. It's all there, Danny. It just needs to be formal. She closed the laptop. Keep building the file, she said. I want everything documented before Monday. Andre nodded. It'll be ready. She reached for the door handle and stopped. Thank you, Andre. Go eat breakfast, he said. She had 30 minutes before the wedding brunch began. She buttoned her jacket against the cold as she walked back across the gravel, her steps steady and unhurried, her face calm. She intended to be at that table before anyone else sat down. The terrace was warm with chatter and the smell of fresh coffee. Round tables had been set with white linens and small vases of pale yellow flowers. Reginald's fiancée had chosen well. Everything was soft and elegant, the lake glittering behind the tree line below. Danny sat with a cousin of Reginald's she barely knew, nodding along to a story about a recent vacation. She kept her posture easy. Her face was open. Her coffee cup had been empty for 10 minutes. She pushed her chair back quietly and slipped inside. The interior of the venue was cool and dim after the brightness of the terrace. The kitchen was to the left, through a short hallway lined with framed landscape prints. She could hear the soft clatter of catering staff inside, the low knock of a ladle against a pot, and then, just before the kitchen doorway, she heard voices. She stopped. Two women, speaking low. The hallway curved slightly, enough that she was out of their sight line. She stood very still. "Just relax about it. The cousins already adore you." Camille's voice, warm and certain in the way it got when she was managing something. "I just don't want it to be awkward." Patricia, softer, more careful, performing modesty. "It won't be." A pause, the clink of a cup being set down. The story was never about Terrence doing anything wrong. The story is about a marriage that had already been hollow for years. These people are practical. They understand these things. Danny did not move. She barely breathed. "I've been telling his aunts that for a long time," Camille continued. "That Danny was never really present, always at her laptop, always on a call. Terrence needed something she wasn't able to give." Another small pause. "By now, most of them have already made up their minds. They're ready to receive you, Patricia. You just have to let them." "What about the ones who've been polite to her this weekend?" Patricia asked. Camille made a soft, dismissive sound, almost a laugh. "Polite is just polite, sweetheart. It's not loyalty. Those are very different things." There was a quiet warmth in how Camille said, "sweetheart." Not new warmth, the easy warmth of a word said many times before. Danny pressed her back against the wall, just out of sight, and understood. Not suddenly, not like a shock, more like a shape coming into focus after staring at it for too long, the way you realize you were already seeing it before you named it. Camille had known for months, the affair, the arrangement, all of it. She had looked at this situation and made a choice, not a passive one, an active one. She had gone to family dinners and Sunday phone calls and cousin group chats, and she had laid the groundwork, brick by brick, telling anyone who would listen that Danny was cold, that Danny was absent, that Terrence deserved better. She had taken every small, real thing, Danny working early, Danny on calls, Danny quiet at family tables because she was tired and trying, and she had shaped those things into a verdict. Not quite enough, never quite enough. And Camille had made sure everyone believed it before anyone even knew to question it. Patricia hadn't just walked into this family. She had been invited, introduced slowly, through whisper and suggestion, by the one woman whose opinion carried the most weight in every room they shared. Danny stood there for 3 full seconds. Then she straightened her jacket and turned back toward the terrace. She paused at the coffee station near the side entrance, filled her cup slowly, added cream, and stirred it. Her hands were steady. She watched the small spiral of cream disappear into the dark. She walked back to her seat. 2 minutes later, Camille emerged from inside, Patricia not far behind her, separating smoothly to different tables as though they had arrived from different directions. It was practiced. Easy. Camille moved toward the table where Danny sat. "Danny, sweetheart." She settled into the chair across from her with the careful grace of a woman who had spent 60 years learning how to take up space without seeming to. "You look rested. The lake air must agree with you." Danny looked up. She smiled, full and genuine seeming, the kind of smile that reached just to the edge of the eyes. "Camille." She reached across and touched the older woman's hand briefly, warmly. "I was just thinking about you. You look beautiful this morning. That color is perfect on you." Camille blinked. It was a small thing, barely visible, just a fraction of a second where her expression didn't know what to do with itself, where the warmth she had been prepared to perform met warmth she hadn't expected to receive, and the two things didn't fit together the way they should have. She recovered quickly. She always did. "Well, thank you, darling," she said, settling her napkin across her lap. But her eyes moved once, quickly, across Danny's face, searching, trying to read what was there. Danny picked up her coffee cup and looked out at the lake. She gave Camille nothing to find. The brunch tables were still being cleared when Danny slipped away from the terrace. She took the long way around the venue, following a stone path that curved down through a row of oak trees toward the water. The lake was flat and gray-green in the afternoon light, the surface barely moving. The air smelled like pine and something faintly metallic, rain somewhere off in the distance. The boathouse sat at the bottom of the slope, small and wood-planked, its double doors propped open. She could hear Reginald before she saw him, his low voice working through something out loud, checking items off a mental list the way he always did. Methodical, unhurried, the kind of man who needed to feel in control of the details because the larger things made him nervous. He was standing near the dock with a folded paper in one hand, phone in the other, reading something and frowning at it. He looked up when he heard her footsteps on the dock planks. "Hey." His voice went careful immediately. Not cold, careful. The way a person sounds when they've been waiting for a conversation they don't want to have. "Hey," Danny said. She stopped a few feet away from him. She didn't cross her arms. She didn't rush. She just stood there in the easy stillness she'd been carrying all weekend, and she looked at him. Reginald folded his paper, tucked it into his jacket pocket. He looked out at the water for a moment before he looked back at her. "How long?" she asked. No preamble, no softening, just the question, clean and direct. Reginald exhaled slowly through his nose. His jaw shifted. "Danny, how long, Reggie?" He looked at her, then he looked down at the dock. 6 months, he said. Maybe a little longer. 6 months. She had suspected. Hearing it confirmed was still something else. It sat in her chest like a stone, smooth and cold and heavy. "A mutual friend told me," he continued. "Somebody who'd seen them together at a restaurant in the city. I told myself it might not be what it looked like." He paused. "Then I told myself it wasn't my business." "And then you told yourself it would ruin your wedding if you said anything." He didn't deny it. That, at least, was something. "I didn't know how bad it was," he said. "I didn't know about the money stuff. I swear I didn't know that part." "But you knew about her." "Yes." The word came out flat and honest. He had enough decency left to not dress it up. Danny nodded slowly. She kept her voice even and low. "And you came to every family dinner, every phone call. You watched him show up here last night with her on his arm. You watched me sitting at that table." She let that breathe for a second. "And you said nothing." Reginald's face tightened, not with anger, with something closer to shame, the look of a man who had known, for a long time, that he was not as good as he wanted to believe he was. "I'm sorry, Danny." He said it quietly, and he meant it. She could tell he meant it. "I genuinely am. That was wrong. I should have told you." "Yes," she said simply. "You should have." A beat of silence passed between them. The water lapped softly against the dock pilings below. Then Reginald shifted his weight and looked at her with something new in his expression, something that was trying to be reasonable. "Listen," he started. "I know you have every right to be angry. I'm not going to argue that. But it's my wedding day. Tonight, the ceremony. This is one day, Danny. Whatever you're planning, whatever you need to do, I'm just asking you to wait. 1 day. Give me that. Give my wife that." He said it gently, thoughtfully even, like it was a fair and measured request. Danny looked at him. She thought about the 6 months he had carried what he knew and set it aside every single time. She thought about the rehearsal dinner, Terrence walking in with Patricia on his arm, Reginald's eyes moving anywhere in the room except toward her. She thought about Camille's voice in the hallway. "Polite is just polite, sweetheart," and the ease with which she'd said it. Everyone in this family had been making decisions about what was convenient for them. Everyone had been choosing their own comfort and calling it grace. "Reggie," her voice was quiet, not unkind, but absolute. "I hear you." She let him believe, for one more second, that she was weighing it. "But I'm not asking for your permission," she said. "I'm not asking for your blessing, and I'm not asking for your timeline." She held his gaze steadily. "You had 6 months to decide where you stood. I'm not giving you one more day at my expense." Reginald opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say to that. He knew it. She could see it in the way his shoulders fell, not with anger, but with the quiet resignation of a man who had made his choice and was now simply living in it. Danny turned and walked back up the stone path toward the venue. The decision was hers. The moment would be hers. And no one, not Reginald's wedding, not Camille's social standing, not Terrence's carefully managed image, was going to determine when or how it came. The ceremony had been beautiful. That was the honest truth, and Danny held it without bitterness. The lakeside pavilion, the white chairs lined up on the grass, the way the late afternoon light had come through the trees in long gold columns, all of it had been genuinely lovely. Reginald's bride had cried at the altar. Reginald himself had cried, which surprised almost everyone. Even Danny had felt something soft move through her chest during the vows. She had let herself feel it. Then she had folded it away and kept moving. Now the guests were drifting across the lawn toward the reception hall, small clusters of people laughing and adjusting their heels in the grass, the sound of a jazz quartet warming up somewhere inside. The air had cooled since morning, and the distant smell of rain had settled into something cleaner, like wet stone and fresh pine. Danny walked in the opposite direction. Andre's rental car was parked near the far end of the lot, away from the main cluster of vehicles. He was already there when she arrived, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a manila folder and a slim laptop balanced on the hood of the car. He looked up when he heard her heels on the asphalt. "You look like you belong at this wedding," he said. "I do belong at this wedding," she said. He almost smiled. "Fair." She stopped beside him, and he turned the laptop so she could see the screen. "It's done," he said. "Everything." He walked her through it one final time, piece by piece, the way he always did. No drama, no flourish, just the facts laid out in a clean, logical line. The forged refinancing document came first. Her signature, copied from a joint tax filing and transposed onto a home equity application she had never seen. Submitted to the bank 8 weeks ago. The equity pulled. $62,000, transferred within 4 days into an account registered under Terrence's company name. From there, Andre traced the path of the money. Out of the company account, into Patricia's marketing firm, documented through a series of invoices Patricia had created herself, detailed, professional-looking, billing for services that had no corresponding work product, no delivery confirmation, no client approval signature. Just the invoices, just the numbers. Her own business banking records show the deposits matching each invoice to the dollar, Andre said. She didn't try to obscure it much. Either she thought no one would look, or she didn't think it mattered. "She thought I wasn't the kind of person who would look," Danny said. "Well," he closed that tab, "she was wrong about that." He pulled up the text confirmation next, a screenshot from the second phone. Patricia's own words in the thread, casual and unbothered. "That's her money, babe. At least it's going somewhere useful," followed by a laughing emoji. Danny had read those words 4 times now. They no longer stung. They had become something else, something solid. Evidence had a way of doing that. It turned pain into purpose. "I've confirmed the appointment with the bank's fraud department," Andre said. "Monday morning, 9 a.m. I'll be with you. Once they open a fraud investigation, the forged signature becomes a criminal referral. That process runs on its own from there." "And Patricia's licensing board?" "A fraud finding automatically triggers a review of her firm's standing." He said it plainly, no satisfaction in his voice, just the fact. "She's got 2 major retained clients right now. Both are corporate contracts that include a conduct clause. A licensing review gets reported. Clients pull out." He paused. "Her firm doesn't survive that." Danny absorbed all of it quietly. Then Andre set down a separate document, 3 pages, clean and printed, and slid it across the hood toward her. "Separation agreement draft," he said. "Protects your consulting business as a sole proprietorship, separates your personal accounts, and flags the forged equity pull as marital fraud. That last part matters. It changes what you're entitled to in the asset division, considerably." Danny picked it up, read through the first page carefully, the way she always read documents, every line, every clause. Then she set it back down and nodded once. "I'll sign it after tonight," she said. Andre looked at her. He had that expression he sometimes got, calm but attentive, like he was making sure he was hearing her correctly. "After tonight," he repeated. "I'm going to address it at the reception," she said, "during the toasts, in front of the family." A beat of quiet passed between them. A car door shut somewhere across the lot. "All of it?" he asked. "All of it that matters." She smoothed the front of her dress. The forged signature, the money, Patricia's invoices, the timeline. She looked at him directly. They enabled this. Camille, Reginald, every person in that room who smiled at her and looked past me. They should hear it the same way I did, all at once, with nowhere to look away. Andre held her gaze for a moment. Then he picked up the folder and handed it to her. "Then you'll want this with you," he said. She took it. The reception hall glowed warm and golden at the end of the stone path, its tall windows lit from within, voices and music already building inside. Danny walked toward it alone, folder in hand, the evening air cool and still against her skin. Inside, the room was filling fast. Guests finding seats, glasses being poured, the jazz quartet now playing something low and easy near the far wall. The round tables were dressed in ivory and deep green, candles flickering at the centers, name cards written in careful script. Danny found her assigned seat near the head table, set the folder down beside her place setting, and sat. She smoothed her napkin across her lap. She picked up her water glass and took a slow, even sip. Around her, the room filled and the noise grew, and the toasts were beginning to be organized up near the front, the best man shuffling index cards, the maid of honor laughing at something. Danny sat still. She waited. The best man's name was Curtis, and he was funny. He had the room laughing through the whole toast, a story about Reginald locking his keys in his car on a first date, something about a borrowed bicycle, a punchline that landed clean. When he lifted his glass at the end, the whole room rose with him, 100 voices blending into one warm sound, glasses catching the candlelight. Danny rose with them. She lifted her glass and smiled at Reginald across the table, and that part was genuine. She meant it. She had always liked Reginald, even now, even knowing what she knew. That was the thing about truth. It was complicated. It didn't make everything simple, it just made everything clear. She waited until the glasses came down. Then she stayed standing. "If I could have the room for just one more moment," she said. Her voice was even, not loud. She didn't need loud. The room was already quieting, the way rooms do when something unexpected shifts the air. Heads turned. Conversations dropped off in small clusters, one by one, like candles going out. Terence looked up from 2 tables over. Patricia's hand was resting on the tablecloth near his. Danny looked at the head table first. "Reginald," she said, "congratulations. I mean that completely. You found someone worth showing up for, and today was proof of it. I hope you build something real." She paused, just a breath. "You both deserve that." Reginald's jaw was tight. He nodded once, slowly. She turned then, steady, unhurried. "I also want to take this moment to address something this family has been carrying quietly for quite a while. And since it was built in a room full of family, I think it should be taken apart in one too." The jazz quartet had stopped. Nobody had told them to. They just had. Danny reached down and opened the folder beside her place setting. She didn't pull anything out. She didn't need to wave papers at anyone. The folder being there at all was enough. People noticed it. Eyes moved to it and stayed there. 8 weeks ago, she said, someone signed my name to a home equity refinancing application without my knowledge. The signature is mine. It was copied from a joint tax filing Terence and I filed 2 years ago. She said it plainly, the way she would explain a line item in a budget. $62,000 of equity was pulled from our shared home. I didn't know. I didn't authorize it. That is called bank fraud. A glass clinked somewhere. Otherwise, the room was silent. That money, along with loan repayments I had been making privately into Terence's construction company for 2 years, was funneled through a marketing firm. She turned her gaze across the room to where Patricia sat, perfectly still, her expression locked into something careful and controlled. Patricia Okafor's marketing firm, documented through a series of invoices she created herself, billing for services that were never performed, delivered, or requested by anyone. Patricia didn't move. Patricia. Danny's voice didn't change. It didn't sharpen or harden. It was the same even tone she'd been using since she stood up. That was the point. The invoices have your firm's letterhead. They have your billing codes. The deposits match each invoice amount to the dollar, and they're drawn directly from funds that came from my forged signature. She let that sit for exactly 1 second. Ignorance was never your excuse. Your own paperwork proves it. Terrence pushed back his chair. Danny. I'm almost done, she said. She didn't look at him when she said it. She didn't raise her voice. She just kept going, and something about that, the steadiness of it, the total absence of anger, made him sit back down. In one of Terrence's messages to Patricia, he described me as ugly. She said the word the same way she would say Tuesday. He said I was getting too comfortable thinking I was the prize. He said he was done pretending to be proud of someone who made him feel small. She paused once, briefly, and let her eyes move around the room. The aunts, the cousins, the family friends who had known her for 7 years. I want everyone in this room to look at me, right now, and then I want you to decide for yourselves whether that assessment was accurate. She stood in her emerald dress, her posture straight, her expression composed. She looked like someone who had slept well the night before, which she had. Nobody said a word. Camille. She found her mother-in-law near the corner of the room, seated rigid and pale. You've spent the last several months telling members of this family that I was cold, that I was always working, that Terrence needed someone more present. She tilted her head, just slightly. You said those things while sitting with Patricia and coaching her on how to fit into a family she was helping to defraud. The people in this room deserved better information than what you gave them. So did I. Camille's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Danny closed the folder. She picked up her glass, still full, untouched, and held it for just a moment. Then she set it down. Thank you all for your time, she said. Congratulations again to the bride and groom. She turned and walked toward the door. She did not look back. The bank's fraud department was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, and the office smelled like recycled air and carpet cleaner. Danny sat across from Andre at a wide conference table, a thick file open between them. 3 days had passed since the wedding. She had slept every one of those nights without trouble, which surprised her at first, and then didn't. The investigator assigned to their case was a woman named Sharon, 50s, reading glasses pushed up on her head, who asked careful questions and wrote everything down in a small spiral notebook. She didn't react to much. Danny appreciated that. This is the refinancing application, Andre said, sliding the document across the table. The signature on line 7. You can compare it to the original from the joint filing 2 years prior. The pen pressure is different. The loop on the D is wrong. Sharon examined it without hurrying. And the funds trail? Andre opened the second tab in the folder. Deposits from the refinancing payout routed into the business account here, then invoiced out through Patricia Okafor's marketing firm in 4 separate billing cycles. Each invoice corresponds to the deposit amount to the dollar. No service contracts, no delivery records, no project documentation of any kind. Sharon wrote something down. Is the co-party aware she's being named? She asked. She will be, Danny said. Sharon looked at her over the edge of her glasses. We'll be in touch within 10 business days to confirm the investigation has been opened. Danny nodded. Thank you. Outside, the sun was white and flat against the sidewalk. Andre walked beside her toward the parking garage, his jacket folded over one arm. How do you feel? He asked. Good, she said, like something is finally moving in the right direction. He nodded once. That was enough. The investigation moved faster than Danny expected. The bank confirmed Terrence's forgery in just under 3 weeks. The findings were formal, documented, and referred directly to the state attorney's office for criminal review. Terrence was notified by certified letter. His attorney, a man Danny had never heard of, called Andre twice. Andre did not call back. Without Danny's quiet financial backing, the private loans, the repayments, the careful cushion she had maintained for 2 years, Terrence's construction company had nothing left to stand on. The operating account ran dry inside of a month. 2 active contracts were pulled by clients once word moved through the industry, the way word always does. A 3rd contract simply expired without renewal. By week 5, the company's website went offline. By week 6, Terrence had let go of his one remaining employee, a site manager who had worked for him since the beginning, via text message. Danny heard that part from the site manager's wife, who was connected to her through a mutual contact. She read the message and felt nothing sharp, just a dull, distant recognition of what happens when a structure built on someone else's foundation finally meets the ground. Patricia's situation unraveled on its own schedule, which was slightly slower but no less complete. The fraud complaint named her firm as a knowing party to the laundered invoices. The state licensing board opened a review within 2 weeks of the complaint being filed. Patricia's 2 largest retained clients, a regional hospitality group and a mid-size property developer, both received notice of the investigation through standard disclosure requirements. The hospitality group terminated her contract by email. The property developer followed within 4 days. Her firm's name circulated quietly among the professional circles she had worked hard to enter, and the invitations to the kinds of events that built reputations stopped arriving. Danny didn't track it closely. She didn't need to. She had only filed what was true. What followed from that was simply the weight of it, settling. Camille's social unraveling was quieter, but Danny felt it was, in some ways, the most complete. The extended family had heard Camille's version of Danny for months. Cold, absent, difficult to love. But Danny had spoken to 3 of Terrence's aunts personally in the days after the wedding, calmly and without drama, sharing only facts. She brought no emotion that could be dismissed. She brought only the record of what she had done for that family, and what had been done to her in return. Families have long memories when they feel they've been manipulated. Camille's calls went unreturned. Her usual seat at Sunday dinners sat empty, as gatherings quietly reorganized around her absence. The cousin who had always praised her cooking stopped posting her recipes online. Small things, but Camille had spent decades building her standing on small things, which meant she felt every one of them when they were taken back. Reginald called on a Thursday evening, 5 weeks after the wedding. "I don't have a good reason for what I did," he said when Danny picked up. "I've been sitting with it every day and I can't make it into something that makes sense, so I'm not going to try." He paused. "I'm sorry, Danny. That's all I have." She was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said finally. "I believe you." It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, not yet. But it was an opening, a real one, and Reginald, to his credit, didn't ask for more than that. The separation agreement took 4 weeks to finalize. Andre had been thorough. Every asset she'd brought into the marriage was documented. Her consulting business, incorporated separately, kept in her name alone, never commingled with Terrence's accounts, was fully protected. Her share of the home equity, minus the $62,000 pulled through the fraudulent refinancing, was calculated and itemized. Her retirement accounts, her intellectual property, her client contracts, everything she had built carefully returned to her. She sat in Andre's office on a Tuesday afternoon, the city quiet outside the window, the agreement spread across his desk in a neat stack of pages. He had tabbed every signature line in blue. She picked up the pen. She signed the last page. 18 months changes a room. The office on the 11th floor of a building on Meridian Street was nothing like the kitchen table where Danny used to sit at 5:45 in the morning, working in the dark while her husband slept. This room had floor-to-ceiling windows, natural light, a long oak desk she had chosen herself without asking anyone's opinion. Her name on the glass door in clean, brushed gold lettering. Roswell Financial Consulting. Not a hobby. Andre was seated across from her now, a printed quarterly report open between them, his reading glasses low on his nose. He had a yellow highlighter in one hand and a cold cup of coffee he kept forgetting to drink. "Revenue is up 31% from last quarter," he said, dragging the highlighter under a number near the bottom of the page. And that's conservative, because the Hartley Group contract doesn't fully post until January. Danny looked at the number. Then she looked at it again, not because she didn't believe it, but because she wanted to feel it properly. "And the Morrison account?" she asked. "Renewed for 2 years. They asked about expanding the scope." He glanced up. "I told them you'd follow up." "I will." She made a note in the margin of her own copy. The office was quiet except for the low hum of the building's ventilation system and the occasional soft sound of traffic 11 floors below. It was the kind of quiet she had learned to work inside of, the kind that wasn't empty, just clean. Andre flipped to the next page. He studied it for a moment, then set the highlighter down. "Heard something through the grapevine," he said. His tone was even, not careful, not cautious, just even, the way it always was when he had information and was deciding how to deliver it. "About Terrence." Danny didn't look up from her page. "Okay." "Mutual contact out in the Eastfield area. Says he's been doing site work for another contractor. Manual labor, day rate." He paused. "Apparently he's not operating under his own name anymore." She wrote down a figure from the report. "All right." "That's all I know," Andre said. "Didn't ask for more than that." She nodded. There was no sharp feeling behind her ribs, no satisfaction that had to be swallowed back down. Just a kind of flat recognition, a collapsed structure meeting the ground, the way structures do when there's nothing left holding them up. She had already felt that months ago, back when it was still news. "And Patricia?" she said. Andre picked the highlighter back up, turning it slowly between his fingers. "Firm dissolved, quietly, a few months after the board's findings came through. No forwarding contact, no announcement." He paused. "Just gone." Danny looked out the window for a moment. The city was bright and ordinary under an early December sky. People moving on sidewalks below, cabs pulling up to corners, a delivery truck double-parked halfway down the block. "Okay," she said again. That was it. No ceremony in it. She hadn't built what was on these pages by thinking about either of them, and she wasn't going to start now. She turned back to the report. "What about the Carver Street proposal?" she asked. "Did the projections come back from the analyst?" Andre blinked once, then allowed himself a small smile, the kind that meant he was aware of what had just happened and appreciated it, and reached for the next folder. "Came in this morning. They're solid. You'll want to look at the assumptions on page 4, but the core model holds." She pulled the folder toward her and opened it. They worked for another 2 hours like that, moving through numbers and projections and contract language with the kind of focused ease that only comes from doing something long enough to stop being afraid of it. The Hartley Group, the Morrison account, a new inquiry from a hospitality developer who had found her through a referral she hadn't even tracked yet. Names that had nothing to do with anything that came before, names that were only hers. When Andre finally packed up to leave, he paused at the door. "Good quarter, Danny," he said. "Good quarter," she agreed. He left. She heard the elevator open and close down the hall. She stayed for another hour, finishing a client memo, tidying the desk the way she liked it. Then she shut the lights off and took the elevator down to the lobby and stepped out into the cold December air, her coat buttoned, her bag on her shoulder, walking the 4 blocks to her apartment the way she did most evenings now. Her apartment was quiet and warm. She hung her coat by the door, set her bag on the chair near the entry table, and carried her laptop to the kitchen island. She opened it out of habit, checked one final email, answered it in 3 sentences, and closed it again. The window above the kitchen sink faced east. The city glowed beyond it, low and steady, and the glass held the faintest reflection of the room behind her and the woman standing in it. Danny looked at her. The woman looked back. Steady, whole, entirely her own. Danny smiled. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.